2 minutes. 2 minutes until the start of the class.
We are now live, so we can cover our housekeeping items.
Good. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start a couple minutes early here with our housekeeping so we can give our presenter, Lynn Rasmussen, plenty of time for her class today. So welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, which is the United States Colored Troops and Buffalo Soldiers, History, Records, and Strategies. Our presenter today will be Lynn Rasmussen, and we are glad that all of you could join us. Before we get started, though, as Brandon mentioned, we do have some housekeeping items. This class is being live streamed. You will be able to review a recording of this class on the Family Searches channel on YouTube. This is different than before. We are live streaming on YouTube. Note, however, that the recording will only be available for a limited time. Lynn will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. Please post your questions in the chat if you are joining us via Zoom, or comments section as we near the end of the presentation. If you are on Zoom and would like to have your questions and comments seen by everyone, please make sure your chat messages are set to panelists and attendees. If you need help with a specific research problem in your family, we encourage you to sign up to meet one-on-one with one of our research specialists in a virtual consultation. And to do that, if you would just go to the Family History Library's website, or you can search virtual research strategy sessions on the Family Search Wiki. In 2021, that's this year, the US and Canada team will be presenting classes on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, usually the first and third Thursdays of the month. The next class, which will be taught by the Family History Library, not necessarily by the US-Canada team, but by members or staff at the Family History Library, will be Navigate, Add, Edit, Standardize, and Print Your Family Search Family Tree. That will be held on Tuesday, May 25th at 2021, 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. That's also then Greenwich Mean Time -7. Our next class for US-Canada will be a panel question and answer, which will be presented on Thursday, May 27th. That is next week. May 27th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, or Greenwich Mean Time -7. If you have a question you would like answered during the panel discussion, please submit it using the link that we are going to share with you in the chat box. And there it is. It just popped up in the chat. So if you do have a question for next week, please click on that blue link and submit your question ahead of time for our question and answer discussion. Again, that's next Thursday. So let me now introduce to you today our presenter, Lynn Rasmussen. Lynn is a research specialist at the Family History Library and a member of the United States and Canada team. She holds a BA in Family History from BYU and the credential of Certified Genealogist. Her research passions include Native American, African American, and Southern United States research. Lynn is looking forward to the day when she can resume on-site research trips, particularly to the National Archives and the Library of Virginia. And I am looking forward to the day when the Family History Library will once again be open. but currently it is not, and so we are going to turn the rest of the time over to Lynn Rasmussen for our presentation today. Lynn?
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's presentation on the history and the records of the United States Colored Troops and the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, during this presentation, terms historically used to refer to African Americans will be used when referring to the historic records, particularly the term colored. This is in no way intended to be offensive. presentation, I'm hoping to be able to help you have a better understanding of the general history of the colored troops and also the general history of the Buffalo Soldiers. I'm hoping to help you recognize the genealogical value of these records and how to find these records on the colored troops and the Buffalo Soldiers. Let's start with the general history of the colored troops. The United States colored troops were regiments of the United States Union Army, which were composed of African American soldiers. Over 170 Army units were created during the Civil War, and many more volunteered and also served in the Navy. On January 1st in 1863, as the Civil War was approaching its third year of conflict, President Abraham Lincoln issued the official Emancipation Proclamation. In part, it read, "All persons held as slaves within the state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States shall then be henceforth and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act to repress such persons or any of them in any efforts they make for their actual freedom." The states in rebellion were Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. They're highlighted here in red. 48 counties located in the western area of Virginia had joined together to form the state of West Virginia. And there were certain other counties in Virginia and some counties in Louisiana who also had sided with the Union. The border states shown here in gray were not included in the Emancipation Proclamation, and their slaves were not freed at this time. Those states are Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. All of those were slave states that had not left the Union. Lincoln had feared that if he pushed these border states too far in freeing their slaves in the Emancipation Proclamation, that they might unite with the Confederacy. West Virginia, which is often considered a border state, in its state constitution, it freed all of those below the age of 25. And upon ratification of 13th Amendment was when it abolished the rest of slavery in that state. Maryland abolished slavery in 1864. Missouri freed slaves in January of 1865. Kentucky, excuse me, please. Kentucky never did ratify the 13th Amendment, but it was forced to free their enslaved with the national ratification of that amendment in January of 1865. So this is important to know as we move through the presentation. Some of the considerations of how to look for your ancestor in these border states will be talked about. Okay, let's see here. In May of 1863, the United States War Department established the Bureau of Colored Troops for the recruitment of African Americans to fight for the Union Army. Recruitment began in full force. We had abolitionists on the side of recruitment. Frederick Douglass, a leading Black abolitionist, encouraged free Blacks and those who had become newly freed to fight for their right for citizenship. Let's read part of his statement. Once let the Black man get upon his person the brass letters US, let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pockets, and there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship in the United States. Another recruitment tactic was this flyer. At this same time as the Emancipation Proclamation, the Confederate nation was making an announcement that they would retaliate against those who were protecting the enslaved and that they would re-enslave or worse, any Blacks that were captured. So the men recruited for military duty, they needed a promise of protection and pay from the United States. And so this was a call to freedom and a call to verify that they would be protected if they did join the Union Army. So 14 states raised volunteer units. That was over 180,000 Black men who enlisted in the Union Army. 144 infantry units, 13 artillery units, 7 cavalry units, and 2 brigade bands, and other smaller units were formed. The officers over these troops were white men, and these units comprised 10% of the Union Army. President Lincoln was quoted as saying, "Without the military help of the Black freedmen, the war against the South could not have been won." The colored troops were disbanded at the end of the war, along with the vast majority of all the Union troops at that time, at the end. Okay. So let's review the general history of the Buffalo Soldiers. The term Buffalo Soldier is a nickname given to African-American United States regular Army soldiers. They were regiments of Black men who served with distinction, mostly on the Western frontier. It is generally believed that this nickname Buffalo Soldiers came about because of their curly hair resembling that of the buffalo, but it is really not clearly known where the term actually started. Buffalo soldiers served on the Western frontier, often during the time of the Indian Wars, also during the Spanish-American War, the Philippine insurrection, and into World War I and II. Things changed for the unit names back then, and we won't be talking about that time period now, but the 93rd African-American regiment or whatever, I can't remember exactly if it's called a regiment, took on the name of Buffalo Soldiers during World War I and II. During peacetime out in the Western frontier, the Buffalo Soldiers built roads. They acted as park rangers for the new national parks. They protected railroads, guarded stagecoach stations, constructed and repaired telegraph lines. They escorted supply trains and mail coaches and served in scouting patrols, and they also protected the border. So let's learn a little bit more about their organization. In July 28, 1866, now remember the colored troops during the Civil War were disbanded in the end of 65. In 66, they passed this Reorganization Act to set up 6 Civil War peacetime regiments of Black enlisted men. They were the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry units and the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st infantry units. In 69, the infantry units were consolidated into the 24th and 25th. So this is what you will mainly be looking for in the unit records, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the 24th and 25th Infantry. They served from 1866 until 1916. And desegregation of the armed service that occurred in 1951. And like I mentioned before, during the time of World War I and World War II, these units, the 9th and 10th and 24th and 25th, did serve. They were active units during that time. In World War II, it started to change. Just for your information. Okay. Oh, this is such a neat document. I wanted to highlight this, that in 1948, President Harry Truman signed an executive order to end segregation in the armed forces. He established the President's Committee on Equality of Treatment and Opportunity in the Armed Services. This was fully implemented by 1951. Okay, so now that we've talked about the general history of the, oh, there I have a quote from there. It's kind of cool. This is what the order did. Okay, it is hereby declared to be the policy of the president that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed service without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. Okay, we're moving into the section now where we'll look at some examples of records about the colored troops and the Buffalo Soldiers and talk about the genealogical value that they might have for you as you're trying to push back your research. The records we'll look at today are compiled military service records, pension records, both soldier pension and widow pensions. And I've also prepared a section on registers, lists, and unit histories. In 1890, the War Department began creating compiled military service records. This means they were gathering muster rolls, payrolls, hospital rolls, regimental records, and other service records into a compiled single folder for each veteran or soldier. They did this from the records from the Revolutionary War all the way through the Philippine insurrection. These records were created. Let's examine what a compiled military record looks like. Okay, we're going to start with Jefferson Howard. Inside the file, there's usually a card like this. It is sort of an index card to the additional cards in the file folder or the packet, sometimes referred to as a packet. This is the first card in the file for Jefferson Howard. Let's take a closer look at what it contains. So we've got his name at the top. You'll usually see the name of the soldier at the top, followed by the company and the unit that they served in, by the rank. Jefferson was a private and a corporal. And then you have this list of the cards that follow this first card. So these other cards are what were created from the other service records. If he's on a list from a hospital, they make a card about it. If he's on a list of a prisoner of war, they make a card about it. They file all these cards behind this main card in the packet. So let's look at what the internal card might look like. We get his name, of course, at the top. That will always be there. We get a personal description. Jefferson was 34. His height was 5'5". His complexion was black. His eyes and hair were both black. He was born in Maury County, Tennessee, and his occupation was a farmer. We also get enlistment information. He enlisted on the 12th of December in 1863 in Columbia, Tennessee. Here's another card. We're looking for additional information. He mustered in, that's when the unit was formed, that's what a muster in is. And that happened in Shelbyville, Tennessee on December 16th. And he enrolled on the 12th, then mustered in on the 16th, and he signed up for a period of 3 years. He mustered in as a private. Okay, let's look at another. As we read these cards, you're always looking for additional information. On this card, we learn that there's this type of card that's called company muster roll. There's usually a lot of these in each packet, so we won't look at all of them, but they will give the dates and they will give whether or not they were present or absent during that time period. So that's why it's called a company muster. They pull the group together, they see who's present, that sort of thing. So you'll often see a lot of these. So the special remarks on this company muster roll are that he was appointed the corporal per regimental order. So he's made a corporal. There it is, on designation up there. Another company muster roll. Now in this one, we learn under the remarks that Jefferson was reduced from the rank of corporal back to private. And as I read this, I didn't really understand if in the continuing remarks it was any kind of a reason why. These remarks down here look to me to be talking about his rifle, his rifled musket and accoutrements, his screwdriver spring form and a wiper, I think. I don't really know for sure what that means, but I don't know if that had anything to do with his reduction in rank. Here's another company muster roll from the November to December in 1865. And we get in the remarks that he died. So he has died of smallpox in a hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. Now this is saying December 20th, 1865. So continuing in his packet was more information about his death. So this is giving us the information that he actually died on the 19th, or maybe that's in the next one, and that he died of smallpox. He is 35 years old at the time, and that his conjugal condition is married. So from his packet, let's review what genealogical information we were able to gain. His name, Jefferson Howard. We also discovered that sometimes he was called Jeff, that he was 34 years old in 1863. So we can calculate his birth to be around 1829, and that it did state his birthplace as Maury, Tennessee. He was 5'5", with black hair, black eyes, black complexion, and he was a farmer, and that he was married. When he enlisted in 1863 for 3 years, and that he was a corporal and reduced to a private. And his unit was Company C of Regiment 15 of the United States Colored Infantry. He died in the General Hospital number 11 in Nashville, Tennessee of smallpox, and he actually died on the 19th of December in 1865. So that is a lot of information just from a service record. Now, everyone's service record will be a little different. Some documents never made it into the committee that was compiling the records. So some information about particular soldiers might be missing. Some might be 1 page, some might be quite a few pages. So they're all different, and they're all going to have some different interesting information about. But what you're going to get for sure is probably the enlistment information, the name, the birthplace, the description, and then a few other things. Probably a marital condition. Okay, let's move on to another example. This is a Benjamin Patterson, and he served in Company E of the 123rd United States Colored Troops. It looks like he was a corporal. Oops, sorry about that. I think I hit the back button accidentally. Benjamin was in his descriptive description. He is 38, he's 5'7½". His complexion is yellow, his eyes are brown, his hair is black, and he was born in Nelson, Virginia. And his occupation is farmer. He is not enlisted. He was drafted on the 19th of September in 1864 in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So it's really great information. If this were your ancestor and you found him living in Kentucky, you may not have known that he was actually born in Nelson, Virginia, or maybe from a census record, you only get Virginia. And this, the genealogical information about him being born in Nelson is very helpful. So he was discharged in December of 65 after his 1-year term expired. Okay, what else do we find out about Benjamin Patterson? Well, right here on this card, we see that it says Richard Patterson and it's crossed out, and it says Benjamin above it. Not quite sure what that means. It is our same guy. And down here under this section of other papers, there is a note that there's a slave claim. Well, what is a slave claim? During the Civil War, 2 acts of Congress were passed, one in 1866 and one in 1864. They allowed loyal slave owners whose slaves enlisted or were drafted into the U.S. military to file a claim against the federal government for the loss of the slave services. The law allowed up to $300 of compensation for slaves who enlisted and up to $100 for slaves who were drafted. So in 1867, this claims process was suspended, but the records and the paperwork about these claims have survived. And most of the records and the paperwork are found in these compiled military service records. Now, why would someone be a slave in 1860? Was it 1864 that he enlisted? It is because this is Kentucky, and we talked about those border states and how things were different there. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation had freed the slaves in the states that were in rebellion. So Kentucky was not considered in rebellion. We talked about the border states and how that was different. So the committee that was formed to create the United States Colored Troops, their documents say that you cannot serve in the colored troops if you are a slave. So you had to, enlistment actually meant freedom to you. So if the owners did not give permission, if the owners gave permission, you could enlist. If they did not give permission, then you needed to run away if you were going to join the army. But because of the protections that the United States government was offering, it was very, very enticing, and many, many thousands and thousands did run away and join. In some cases, as you're thinking genealogically about this, a flight from slavery might have led to an enlistment right there in the same area of where you were from. Or it might have created the desire in you to go to another state or another county, another state. So you want to be aware of that when you're searching for your veteran, that they may not have enlisted if they wanted to get away from where they were living. They wanted to get away from there, they might have enlisted somewhere else. So keep that in mind as you look through these records. Okay, let's go look at what this slave claim looks like. Here is the document. And I've blown it up a portion of it for you. It is a claim of Richard Patterson for the compensation of Benjamin Patterson, who was drafted. And it states in this document, by purchase, in this document that the enslaver or the past enslaver is filing, he needs to prove slave ownership. And so that is in the document. And here's what he wrote: by purchase at public sale of the estate of James Shields, Esquire, in the year 1838. So he's stating how he came to own Benjamin. And so we get some great information for pushing back your research. We know that he was owned by James Shields, and in 1838, he became what was called then the property of this Richard Patterson. So we have found some great genealogical information. We have another surname that Benjamin might have used earlier in his life, the Shields name, and the Patterson name. And so we've got locations, and then you could take this James Shields, see if he came from the Nelson, Virginia area, where we get in the military records that Benjamin was born. Okay, let's review what genealogical information we obtained about Benjamin. We know he's 38, and so we could calculate his birth year to be about 1826 in Nelson, Virginia. We get his physical description, that he was a farmer, when he was drafted, and that was in Bowling Green. And we get these enslaver names. Now we're going to take a look at a Spanish-American War era compiled military service record. This is the file for Lemuel Jones. He served in Company K of the 9th U.S. Volunteer Infantry. Notice that the title Buffalo Soldier is nowhere in this document. It is a nickname. So when you're searching for records, you might find historical information under the name of Buffalo Soldier, but you're not going to find documents, military documents with that title. Okay, let's take a look. He's got, his name, his rank, and his company up there at the top. And he's also got the card numbers. So as we dig deeper into the cards, we get where he's born, where he mustered in. He mustered in New Orleans in 1898. And he was 35 years old, so we could calculate his birth year and his physical description. We also get where he was born. He was born in New Orleans, so he lived there and he was born there. His occupation is a teamster. That might be helpful as you search for records on him. He signed up for 2 years, and he was actually even living in New Orleans, so it sounds like he hasn't gone far. His marital condition is that he is married to Mrs. Lemuel Jones of New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, as we look at his service, he was appointed a sergeant, and we have here that he was discharged in Santiago, Cuba, in April 26th of the year 1899, and that he had good character. That was written in his record. So that's probably why he was made a sergeant. He was probably very reliable, and that's good to know. Now in this one, Lemuel Jones had some medical cards filed in his card folder. In April of 1898, he was in the hospital with yellow fever. Then in January of 89, he was in the hospital with muscular rheumatism. There we go. And a third card, so this is in February of 89, he had pneumonia. So he was having a struggle there in Cuba. Now, when he was discharged at the end of his service term that he'd signed up for, he wrote a letter to the commanding officer, and here is what he requested. I have the honor to request that I be discharged from the U.S. volunteer service by reason of General Order number 54, stating that those whose service on the island has been honest and faithful may obtain this discharge and remain. I certainly desire to stay on the island of Cuba. So this is wonderful information that he asked to stay in Cuba, which really kind of surprised me because of the medical conditions that seemed to be climate caused, that he was distressed with, that he would want to stay there. He also has a wife back in New Orleans. So I don't know whatever happened to Lemuel, if he ever went back to the United States and back to his wife, or it just creates in your mind additional records to go search for. Did his wife die? Is there no one to go back to? Or did he just stay for a little while in Cuba? Or did he stay forever in Cuba? Let's review the genealogical information from this packet. 35 in 1898, so he's born about 1863 in New Orleans. We've got his physical description. We know that he lived in New Orleans in 1898 when he enlisted. He was living there. He was a teamster, and he was married to Mrs. Lemuel Jones. I so wish we had a first name for her. and that he suffered illnesses when he was on the island of Cuba, and that he requested to stay in Cuba. So all that would be very helpful. Now we're going to move to pensions and widows' pension records and see what kind of wonderful genealogical information is contained in those. Now, pension records are the most fruitful of the military records. Now, not every veteran will have a pension record file. For those who do, it's wonderful news. And then again, just like with the service records, some are better than others. Some pension files might be 1 or 2 pages. Some I've seen over 200 pages. And so these are really worth looking at. So let's dig into some pension records. Oh, first we're going to talk about what you might find in them. Okay, so in a soldier's pension, it is, oops, what did I put in here? Sorry about that. Okay, here we are. So for military service, you're going to find their regiment, their rank, their time in the service, their age. You're probably going to find the place of residence, any health or injuries that that occurred during their service. You're going to find a lot of information about that if that happened, because that's what a pension is about. You're going to find witness statements, because if there's no document to prove something they need to prove for their pension, they will get affidavits and other types of testimonies that will bear witness to what they're trying to prove. We'll also get narratives. These narratives probably hold the most wonderful genealogy information in them. Now, in a widow's pension, they're even better, because the widow needs to prove her marriage. So you will find place of residence, age, you'll find the soldier's service, you'll find information about the soldier's death, because she does need to prove that he died, and usually that's going to come from military records, or death. It doesn't have to be death during the time they served, it could be death after. So sometimes you get a death certificate. You get names of dependent children. You get witness statements and affidavits and narratives, just like in a soldier's pension. You probably find the maiden name of the widow. You may even find a marriage certificate or some kind of document that is verifying that they married. And if there were previous marriages, those need to be proven that they ended legally in either a divorce or a death. So you get that kind of information too. Let's take a look at some pensions. This is a pension index card. Now, pensions, these index cards were created for pensions up to 1916. You will see cards like this. These cards serve as an index. So on these cards, let's blow it up and look a little closer. You've got the name, you've got the service, and then these numbers here. These numbers, the date that the pension was filed right here, and the application number. So when they start an application, there's an application number. Certificate number indicates that the process was complete and they received the pension. So if this is blank, you may have an application started and there will be a file for that, but they didn't receive their pension, which really, you're still going to get the same genealogical information. In fact, sometimes when they are rejected, you get even more information, because they keep trying to prove things and add more information to the file. So if we want genealogy information, we care about, was an application started? Whether they received the pension or not is just life history. And then you have the state where it's filed, which may not be the state they served from. It's the state they're filing from, where they're currently living when they file. So be aware of that, that if it's a different state here than you're expecting, because that's not where they served in the military from, don't worry about that. Okay, let's dive into an actual pension, some documents. Now, these pension applications can be long, and so I won't be showing you every page, but I'm pulling out some pages that have some great genealogical information. We're going to visit Harry Reid, and his pension packet. He served in Company G of the 10th Regiment of the United States Colored Infantry. Sometimes it's colored troops, sometimes you see the I, colored infantry, and sometimes it's when you get past the Civil War, they're volunteers. You often see a V, but it's all the same thing. Okay, so here in his, now let's talk about the word invalid. Invalid, there's different stages of being invalid. So you're called an invalid if you have some kind of problem created from your service that's keeping you from earning a living. And so in 1890, the Congress Act of 1890, invalids, people who were living their life and getting older and having problems with their health could apply for a pension. So Henry was living in Virginia City, Norfolk, Virginia. He was age 70 in 92 when he began this pension process. And so that is a calculated birth date of 1822. He was discharged in Galveston, Texas in 1866. And he is claiming that he has rheumatism, disease of the lungs, and partial failure of eyesight. Then in this next document, he expands on that. Whoops, excuse me again. That he has rheumatism in arms and legs, injury in the back by carrying a backpack, so that he is totally disabled from labor. So he is relating his ailments to what happened during the service. So, and that's what they need to do to prove an invalid pension. Okay, this is a really fairly unique document, actually. This is an original that the pension was received. Now, this one seems to be probably an original of an increase in pay, because it says it's hereby certified that in conformity with the laws of the United States, Henry Reid, who was a private in Company G of the 10th Regiment, United States Colored Volunteer Infantry, is entitled to a pension at the rate of $10 per month to commence on the 17th of July, 1,890, and $12 per month, January 31st, 1894. So this is for an increase in his pension, and it's because of his increasing inability to earn his support by manual labor. So this is usually given to the family. So it's probably in the packet because he probably had his other certificate and this one was just for an increase. That's my guess as to why this might be in there, but they're beautiful documents. Okay, let's move on here. Also in there was his death certificate. This is a wonderful find. It's a little odd though. See if you can figure out what's wrong with this. Does his death year looks to me like 1916, but down here on this stamp, it's stamped by the pension office in 1910. So that's probably a really bad zero there. But there are additional documents that help clarify what's going on here in his for his death. But they think he's 83. They put a question mark here. So that's really cool to have that right in the packet. But there's also this particular death certificate. This is a notice to the pension office from the Southern branch of the National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers. So he was probably associating with getting help from, or maybe even living at this home. And they state his death right here as the 22nd of August, 1906. So that stamp was a little misleading because he really did die in 1906. This letter was stamped just a week later. So this letter that went off to the pension office is probably a better death record than his death certificate. Now, why he dies in 1906 and has a death certificate, remember it had that 191 and then the handwritten letter, or excuse me, digit. So I don't know if they made that later or what, but that's very strange. So you want to be, my point is with all this is you want to be very careful when you read these documents, just like you do with any document. You'll analyze carefully, and you want to read every document. Don't just skim past something like this because you see, oh, that's just another thing about his death. Read it carefully. Also in his packet is his marriage license. Wow, what a find. So Henry Reid was married on the 26th of March, 1896 in Norfolk, and he was 75, and he states that he's born in Prince Anne County, and it states his parents. So when do you ever get a document of someone born around 1822 that names their parents? This is really awesome. So what a great find in a military packet. I'll let you just look at that for a minute. This is Henry's information, and over on the right-hand side is his wife's. So this is the information that we found out about Julia, that her name is Julia Brinkley. She's 38. She's born in Enlistment, Virginia, and it gives her parents too and who they were married by. So really wonderful. There's that information again. Okay, this was a particular page in his packet that listed two living children. So I don't know for sure why he was asked this question. I have a suspicion that maybe I'll remember to mention later, but he has a living child, James Langley Reid, who's about 40, and this Mary Jane is not his wife, it's his sister. I got that wrong, and then when I was reanalyzing, I realized that these are both James's children. And I didn't change that. Sorry about that. That's a little confusing, but he has two living children. Now it does say that Mary Jane Reid right over here is married. So I wish we had her married name, but we don't, but we do have some information to help us find it. There you can see that better now. Sorry. Okay, now when Henry died, Julia is now applying for the accrued pension that was not paid to her between the last payment and when Henry died. So she wants that money for those couple of weeks or month that that he was still alive. The payments come, I think it's different in different years. Sometimes they come every 3 months or every month. So that's what she's doing here. She's not filing for a widow's pension because she would not qualify for that because they married in 1896 and that was after the pension law. So she's just wanting this money. But the thing about this process is that in wanting that, she has to prove some things. She has to prove her marriage. She has to prove she was never married before. She has to prove a name. I think she's the one who has a name change. Yes. So she needs to prove that she's Julia Ann Reid. So you get these narratives. These are what these narratives are for, they go out and they ask neighbors, family, and others who know these people to give testimony. And this is the testimony of one of her neighbors. And here's what he wrote in this narrative. I know that Julia Ann Reid has married since the death of her late husband. See, if she's married, then she's filing under a new name and she needs to prove that she was Julia Reid, okay? Because she is now my lawful wife. So this is her second husband verifying that she's the same person. It says, I further swear that the claimant, Julia Ann Cross, now she's Julia Ann Cross, was not previously married before she first married Henry Reid as Julia Ann Brinkley. So he's verifying right there What's this going to do for us? We know her maiden name is Brinkley, and that wasn't a first married name. I have known the said Julia Ann Cross almost all of her life, lived on nearby farm, and saw and talked with her almost every day from childhood. So this is a reliable witness, although he does have motive, being her new husband. And this packet was filled with these kinds of narratives. And these narratives are full of life details about what it was like during that time period. They are really fascinating and add not only to our genealogical content, but our historical family content also. So read them all. Now, this is a ruling from the Board of Review, or at least some communication between the Board of Review who's deciding about this. And this one pension office worker says, in view of the soldier's statement as to marriage, can Julia be considered his legal wife? Like, well, I mean, we had some verification on that, some testimony, but here's what they're worried about. He meaning Henry, married Emmeline according to slave custom in the state of Virginia and lived with her until 1878 or 1879 when they separated. No divorce. So they're contesting that Julia's marriage to Henry might not be legal if he was previously married according to the slave law of Virginia, which they legalized in that state, and they had no divorce. So it doesn't matter so much to us whether or not Julia gets her money. We want to know that Henry Reid was married to Emmeline until about 1878. That's what we want to know. So when we go find Henry Reid in the 1870 census or something like that, when we're searching for other records, we need to know that if there's a Henry Reid with a wife Emmeline, that could very well be the right one. So you see how valuable all this information is and how you need to read every one of the documents. All right, let's review what we learned about Henry. We learned when he was born and where he was born. We learned when he died and where he died. We learned he married Emmeline when he was enslaved. They probably had some children. In fact, those children that were talked about in the record were probably could be Emmeline's. It certainly is a good theory. So he had, again, I've got this wrong here. I'm so sorry about that. And that he married Julia Brinkley II. We believe it was his second marriage. And all that is very helpful as we push back our family. We also got information about Julia Brinkley Reid Cross. She's also known as Julia Ann. She was born about 1856, and we know where. She married Henry Reid in 96, and her second marriage was to Taylor Cross. Yeah. Now, we don't know exactly when from the documents in this file, but we know it was before the 6th of March, 1910, when he made that narrative statement of testimony. So we've got that much information to help us. Okay, now we're going to look at a widow's pension. This is, remember Jefferson Howard, who we looked at his service cards and that he died in Tennessee of smallpox? This is one of the pages from his service record. But remember that he was married? There's a clue right there that you need to go look for a widow's pension. So I did and found Pearly Howard, who was the widow of Jefferson. Her file had over 200 papers in it. So I was fascinated with the story of Pearly. So you're going to get the thumbnail version of Pearly's story. So Pearly filed in 1868. There was the pension law of 1867 for widows and dependents who lost their father or husband during the war. They could receive a pension immediately, fairly close to immediately. So when she filed, she was age 25, so she's born about 1843, and she claims to be the widow of Jefferson Howard. Now she has to prove it. So what we want are all those documents where she is trying to prove it. She claims that she married Jeff Howard on the 25th of November, 1858 or 59 at the Howard plantation. They had 3 children born, and they are all deceased at this time she's filing. She swears she was never previously married, and she did receive the widow's pension in 1869. Now, there's a deposition in the, I didn't blow this up because it's such terrible handwriting, you can't read it anyway. So I'll just have some transcribed sections. But in this deposition of James Howard, we get a lot of information about Pearly. And James Howard had known her all his life. He knew that Pearly's father was Peter Nelson. He knew that Pearly was born 1843 or 44, and that she was the slave wife of Jeff. And he is her former enslaver. He inherited her from his father, Willoughby Howard, in 1862 when Willoughby died. So this is testimony from a living previous enslaver who is helping her get her pension. Pearly married a second time in 1873, Benjamin Cottrell, and she married under the name of Pearly Nelson. So Pearly is dropped from her pension from Jefferson Howard's service because she remarried. So she's not receiving that pension anymore. But Benjamin also served. Now, Benjamin died in 1891. So Pearly, under the pension law of 1890, applied for the pension as the widow of Benjamin Cottrell. And she was rejected because there's no legal widow recognized. That was the reason they stated for the rejection. Well, why is there no legal widow recognized when we have that marriage record of Pearly Nelson marrying Benjamin Cottrell? Well, and the testimony from the former enslaver verified that her father's name was Nelson, so she was using her maiden name. So that's probably not the problem. So let's dig a little deeper. Well, the problem was this. Ben divorced Pearly in 1881, which she claimed she had never known. Ben was married to Irma and had moved to Florence, Alabama. And the divorce was located in the Colbert County, Alabama court records. And this is the document sent by the county clerk of Colbert County verifying that the divorce record is on file there in their books. So then Pearl, she's not going to get that pension. So she applies for a renewal of the pension as the widow of Jefferson Howard. She wants that pension renewed because of the divorce. So she's rejected from that. And the reason is that it's about the divorce. It says that she's rejected on the ground that her pension terminated because of her remarriage to one Benjamin Cottrell, and she having afterwards been divorced from him upon his and not her application. She has no title under said act. So that I read that to believe that if she had divorced him for abandonment or cruelty or something, that maybe she would have received his pension, but because he divorced her, she had no grounds. So even though these are rejected documents, they are full of information that helps us learn about Pearly and her life and helps us find more records about her. And that's what we want, her and her family. In the genealogy summary of Pearly, she was married to Jefferson Howard on the Howard plantation. She even personally described it herself as being in front of her father's house. Yeah. Her enslaver was James Howard, who inherited her from his father's estate. That was Willoughby Howard. It also said in the document that James and Willoughby were the enslavers of Jefferson. We learned her maiden name was Nelson. Her father was Peter Nelson. We also learned her mother's Eddie Nelson. From that information, I found Pearly as a young, she's in the family in the 1870s. She's living with Peter and Eddie, and Harriet, her sister, is there too. That's Harriet's married name. She's in the household. And she did say in one of her depositions that after Jefferson had died, she went back to live with her parents, and she started using the name Nelson. And that's why when she married Benjamin Cottrell, she was using the name Nelson. So that all made complete sense to me. She has 3 deceased children. Adelaide, she put this in the record. Adelaide died when she was age 4. Julia died at age 2, and Emmeline died at 1 week. So by the time Jefferson died, all of these children had died also. It makes me wonder if an epidemic went through. We don't know that they died the same year. We just know how old they were when they died. So it would be interesting to pursue that, to me at least. We know she married Benjamin Cottrell, and she married him in the farmyard of the plantation under a tree. So she got real detailed in her descriptions. She was divorced by Ben in 1881. And one of the sisters gave a deposition, and she said that she had the Bible record of her birth, and it was the 10th of March, 1844. So if you were researching this family, what would you do? You'd go hunt down the Bible record and see if there is more information about the other children in the family or the other slaves on that plantation. Or even if you weren't related to Pearly, but you had family who might be enslaved on this Howard plantation in Maury County, Tennessee, it'd be worth reading this extensive pension file. There are numerous names of family members of Pearly, Ben, and Jefferson, all mentioned in that file. There are numerous names and relationships of the enslaver family too. So read all the documents. I probably can't say that enough. Okay, we're gonna look at another widow's pension. This widow has some dependents, and I wanted to show you that. This is Elizabeth Hansford, and Strouder is her soldier husband. And so he served in the Company C of the 24th United States Colored Troops. They are living in Fairfield, Adams County, Pennsylvania, where, as we learned from the packet, they have lived for a long time. Now, this is a deposition of the friends because remember, Elizabeth has to prove things. She has to prove her husband's death. She has to prove her relationship with him, her marriage, and she is also going to let them know that she has some dependent children. So she has no certificates. So she is relying on the deposition of friends. So in this deposition from friends, they state this, that Strouder died the 25th of February, 1885, and that these friends did assist in burying him, and that he was the husband of the claimant. So all that was proved in that statement. Then farther on down, they mentioned that it was a correct transcription from the Bible record right here, that he died, that they put D's instead of T's. Strouder Hansford died February 25th, 1885. So somewhere there's a Bible record, which is pretty cool to learn. Also, we learned that Strouder might be a different spelling, so of Strouder. So you want to be aware of this as you go look for additional records about this man, that his name could be spelled that way. Okay, now here is a deposition about the marriage and the birth of the oldest child. So in here, it says that we lived as neighbors to the applicant and her husband. They name him, that they lived peacefully together with all the children in the family. And then they go on and say, the said Strouder Hansford acknowledged the child Adeline as his before marriage to the mother of said child. We never heard the legitimacy of said child questioned. So this is stating that she is the mother of the child, even though the birth of the child occurred before their marriage. And then here is the Justice of the Peace. They got him to certify that on the 25th day of May in 1877, these two people, Strouder, Hansford, again another spelling, and Elizabeth Peters, we get her maiden name, of this same county, they're both residents of that county at this time, they were joined in marriage. And so this is a testimony of the Justice of the Peace. Next, we get a document that gives the births of the children. We see that this birth of Adeline does occur a few months before the marriage. So that's wonderful information to have. And of course, she needs to prove his death. And so the pension was dropped. This is her death. I'm sorry. This is her death. We already proved Strouder's death. This is her death. So you get this death information. Although there's no certificate like we saw in some of the other pension files, there is the pensioner dropped record. So we know when she died. So we have learned about the family that they lived in Adams County, Pennsylvania for some time, that they married and lived as husband and wife. And we did get that marriage date. And we got Strouder's death date and that he died in Adams County. And we got the 3 children in their dates and Elizabeth's date, all from the testimonies of others. Okay, we're going to move on now to a section on registers, lists, and histories. Okay. Let's just talk a little bit about what a register is and what a return is. Registers are lists that recorded the name and other information of the soldiers who enlisted in the Army. And the regular Army is the career soldiers, and it is a Army force that remains in service during peacetime. And that's what the Buffalo Soldiers were, regular Army. So you're going to look for them in regular Army records. African-American soldiers after the Civil War were regular Army. Okay. So, and returns are reports from the units that are sent back to headquarters. One large collection of enlistments is the Register of Enlistments in the U.S. Army, 1798 to 1914. Family Search has this set of records digitized and indexed. It's named searchable. The link to this record is in your handout. We're going to look at an example from this set. This is an example page, a register of enlistments. For this line I've highlighted is Silas Coleman, and he enlisted January 10th, 1871 in Cincinnati, Ohio for the term of 5 years. He was born in Maddox, Kentucky, and his age is 21, so we can calculate that he was born about 1850. He is a laborer, and his eyes are black, his hair is black, his complexion is black. Now there's a second side to this big open book. So let's look at that for his additional information. He is put in Regiment I, 24th Infantry. So does that surprise us? He was going to go to the 24th or the 25th, right? Because he's African-American. And he was discharged 5 years later. He served his whole term in 1876 in Texas. Here's another set available on Family Search. It's returns from the regular Army cavalry regiments, 1833 to 1916. So this covers the time period for the Buffalo Soldiers. Now remember, we're not going to find them in the title of a record set as Buffalo Soldiers. So on this, this link is in your handout to this set of records of the cavalry. And so where are we going to go? These are not indexed and digitized. They're digitized, but they're not indexed. So you have to search them using the browse only method. So we're going to look for him where? We're going to look for him in the 9th or 10th, because those are the regiments that are the African-American regular Army soldiers. So you just scroll on down in Family Search and choose the icon. If you see the camera icon, it is a digital set, but there's no magnifying glass, which indicates it's indexed. So we're going to take a look at an example. This is what an Army return would look like. Now they look different from year to year or different eras, but basically this is what they are. They're a report. This is a report of July 1898, a return from the 10th Cavalry. Okay, these are not as useful unless you already know the regiment and the company of your ancestor, because that's how they're filed. But they may be helpful in finding out more information about your ancestor's service. Let's zoom in on this. Here's a section, I chose this from the bottom. This is the section on absent enlisted men. I found that more interesting to find out what the ones that were absent were doing. So this little section, we could probably, it's big enough, we could probably read that together. We've got these soldiers in the regiment, and this one, these two are at Fort McPherson in Georgia. They're on a recruiting assignment. And then James and Johnson and George Strouder are in Lakeland, Florida. They've been retained by a civil authority. So maybe they had a little too much fun or something. Now, Henry Hughes and Albert are at Fort Assiniboine, that's in Montana, and they're also on recruiting service duty. These last few servicemen are all serving in Cuba. 2 of them are guarding troop property over there. This is during the Spanish-American conflict, or maybe right before it. And these are on a gun detachment. So they've been assigned to this Hotchkiss gun detachment. I thought that was interesting. You can find out a little bit about what they did in the service from these returns, but not as genealogically helpful as some of the other records are. I also wanted to highlight books and compiled lists. There are lots of books and compiled lists, and how to find a few of these kinds of books and compiled lists set, where they are. That's what we're going to talk about. This is an example of a compiled list of soldiers who served in the 3rd United States Colored Regiment. The 3rd came out of Pennsylvania, and they mustered in the north of Pennsylvania to the training camp at Fort William, Pennsylvania. This book that these pages come out of is called The History of Pennsylvania Volunteers, 1861 to 1865. And it is in the Family Search catalog. You look it up in the catalog, and it's digital, so you can see the images there right from the catalog. This is another example of a digital book. This one is on the troops of the 7th Regiment of the Colored Troops. They mustered in Baltimore, and many of the soldiers came from Baltimore and the surrounding counties. And this book contains regimental history, battles, list of soldiers by company. Now, many other states have record books similar to this one, where you can find lists of soldiers and information about where they mustered in, maybe even where they were from or where they were born. These book lists can often tell you if they were transferred or if they died in the service, and it maybe even include the date and location of the death. So these kinds of books and compiled lists are very valuable if you are in this stage where you're searching and to know if your ancestor served. These can be very helpful. So let's move on to finding the records. Now that you've seen what wonderful goodies they can hold, you probably want to go find them. Now let's first talk about the compiled military service records. Family Search has images and indexes. Ancestry does too, as does Fold 3. The National Archives has the paper files. You can order them for a fee, or you can go to the National Archives when it opens back up in person and get them for free that way. So the compiled military service records are pretty much out there digitally. Now, it is possible that your veteran might not have a compiled military service record. So it doesn't mean they didn't serve. Okay, let's talk about the pension application files. Family Search has index only. What they have is those cards that we showed you in the very beginning of the pension section. So they have we have two databases where you can look at those pension cards. Okay, Ancestry also is index only, has the same exact digitized set. But sometimes their search engines work a little differently. So do check them both if you're not finding it in one or the other. Fold 3 is the only place that has some digital images and the index. They are in the process of a wonderful project of digitizing the widows' pensions. They are at 21% right now, but it is growing. It's growing slowly. This past year has been very difficult on the digitizing images at the National Archives process. So that's where we're at with digital pension files. You're probably going to have to order them. Most of them are not available digitally. I do have the link on how to order from the National Archives in the handout. Okay, now we're going to talk about where to find books and compiled lists. Now I've put a screenshot of the Family Search catalog here, and I wanted to show you, just give you some tips verbally of what you can do to get to the colored troops and the Buffalo Soldiers and that sort of thing, okay? Subjects, you want to use the subject military, African-American military. If there's a state, you could put Georgia African-American military. You could put Georgia military. You want to try all kinds of tweaking of those kinds of terms. But under subjects, it needs to be something like you're not going to, in subjects, if you put Buffalo Soldiers, you're not going to find anything, because subjects are a more narrow list of broader subjects, if that makes sense. But you can use a subject search and a keyword search at the same time. You could put military, United States military, and then you could put Buffalo Soldiers in keywords. And that would find anything that has Buffalo Soldiers in the title of the book or in the description of the book that the cataloger creates. So you can bounce back and forth using different keywords with different subjects to try to narrow down the books that you're looking for. Once you find a book, it may be digital. If it's not in copyright, then we have worked hard to get books digitized from off our shelves so that you can read them at home for free. If you don't find what you want digital, but you have a title, you can search for that title through WorldCat, right here. WorldCat is it's a world catalog. That's what that means. So you can find other libraries that have that book, and you might be able to find a library near you that has that book that you need and that you want. Okay, and interlibrary loan is another way that you can use your local library to obtain books, but the Family Search catalog will help you at least find the titles. So it's a very useful tool. I hope that if you're not acquainted with how to use the catalog, we have some great classes offered. We can put some information about that in the chat. Family Search also has a section called Books. This tab right here, Books, takes you to the Family Search Digital Library. Now this is the all of our digital books are in the digital library, but we share our digital library with 12 other affiliated libraries around the United States. So you are able to see their digitized books through this system, and their guests at their libraries are able to see Family Search digitized books. So it's a sharing of digital books. So No sense in all of us going out there and digitizing the same books over and over. We have made this relationship where we will share the digital books. So this is an often underused resource on Family Search, Family Search Digital Library, found under the Books tab. We've also created, as part of the Family Search Wiki, the African American Digital Bookshelf. This is a specifically African American list of digital books. We are pulling any free digital book we can find out there. Most of them right now are coming from Family Search, but some are coming, as you can see right here, some are coming from Internet Archive. These books are laid out with the United States category first, and then they break down by state. I can't ever say that word. Specific African American digital books. So this is a great resource. Come back often to it. The link is in your handout. It's called the African American Digital Bookshelf, and we add things to it all the time. So come back often. Other places to look for books and compiled lists would be Ancestry has some digital books on their site. You can search there. Now, state and county genealogical societies often produce these kinds of books and lists. So check out the websites. You can use the Family Search Wiki to find the state archives contact information and the county contact information, as well as genealogical society contact information and websites. State archives are a great resource. And again, use the wiki if you want to find out the contact information and website for state archives. We have a page for every state in the United States and a page for every county in the United States in the Research Wiki that gives you all kinds of resources. We also have African American pages that give you all kinds of resources. Your local library might be a place to go. And if you can't find what you need at your local library, you possibly can have the librarians help in using WorldCat and finding something that would be helpful for you. I want to tell you lastly about a couple of projects. There's a project called Buffalo Soldier Pensions, and this project is through the National Archives. I have some links, 2 links to this. One is an informational link where you can read about the project, and the other is the project page. So there are only 400 pension application files for the Buffalo Soldiers, or they're calling them at the National Archives, the case files of the Indian Wars pension applications. So it's that time after the Civil War up until the Spanish-American War in about 1898. 119 of these have been crowdsourced and uploaded onto this site, and they're hoping to get all 400 of them digitized by volunteers and up on the site. So look into that if you're interested in helping out. You can also go and view the 119 uploaded files and read them. Also, the International African American Museum Center for Family History has a program where you can take your home records that are Bible records, funeral programs, and any other sources that you have, even military resources that you have, and upload them into their Center for Family History and share them with others. So this is a growing project that's just getting off its feet, but I think it's a wonderful idea of how we can share these more personal records and how we can get them out there for others to use for their family history research. So closing with that, those 2 projects, will now take questions.
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute. So I had to go find my mute button. Okay, so we do have some questions here. So we will start right now. So Leslie asked very early on in the class, I believe, do you know what a loyal slave owner, what is a loyal slave owner?
They're loyal to the United States Union Army and government. That's what that would mean.
Okay, all right, that was a quick one. If a soldier, Charles asks, if a soldier mustered in Tennessee and mustered out in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, have you read anywhere how the soldiers traveled back to their home state?
Yeah. Usually they walked. They might have stayed in groups. So yeah, there wasn't any military transportation provided for them, especially in the, earlier times, the 19th century. When my dad mustered out, he hitchhiked home. So
Cool. I actually wrote an article a couple of years back about an African American soldier who served. He was from Pennsylvania, but served in one of the units. I can't remember which. He was mustered in one of the New England states. I think it was Connecticut, but he was mustered out then in Texas, and he and his unit actually then traveled by ship. I believe from Galveston around Florida up to New York. And this was after the war in 65, or when the war ended in 65. And then he was part of the parade that marched in New York at the end of the war. So some of them did take ships for transportation back to their homes. But he was from Pennsylvania, got off at New York, and eventually, I guess, just had to probably just walk home or whatever transportation.
that is a super cool story that you read. I'm glad to know that maybe they did travel as units, and maybe even the military helped them get back home.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Okay, so Ruby says, can we find a list of all colored enslaved free people who received land after the Civil War and those who were able to retain their land?
Probably the best way to discover that, there's no list, but the Freedmen Bureau records probably have some lists locally created. Also, you're probably just going to get into the deeds of the local area, the county where they're living and owning land, to see how they got that land. So is that helpful?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if there's complete lists.
You might have like local areas create lists. There's no national list. There's no list on any of these websites like Family Search or Ancestry. But if you look in the catalog under the county that you're interested in, or even the state, and look under the category of African American or minorities, you might find some lists.
Yeah, and also too, that's another, I believe, comment that you made was also checking with the local historic and genealogical societies in those areas, because they may have created lists as well.
That is very true.
There's lots of stuff. There's lots of records in these local areas that are not online, probably never will be online. So whatever area you're doing research in, it's always good to check with the local historic or genealogical society. Yeah. And then, as you said, Lynn, also too, the deeds, just the actual deeds themselves. So this is just a comment from Sue. She says, please mention that you may also find records for your white ancestors here, as they often led the colored troops. You will see the initials USCT after their names in their Civil War records. They are all honored at the African American Civil War Memorial and Museum in Washington, D.C. And she also says you can receive a certificate stating that your ancestors served. If you can visit it, it's a very nice memorial. So there you go.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. That's wonderful information. Yes, the officers of the colored troops were white, and their records are going to be together. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Leslie asks, can you download PDFs of our books?
Sometimes you can do that. It just depends. If the system will let you, then it's copyright okay to do so. If it won't let you, that's the reason. There's so many different copyright contracts out there with our books that I can't tell you any way to tell unless you just try.
Yeah, that's a good, that's a great answer. You just got to try it. Yeah. Nikki asks, are you saying that the family? Okay, so you mentioned interlibrary loan. So she wants to know if Family Search actually participates in interlibrary loans with other libraries for non-digitized books.
Yes, we do not participate in interlibrary loan. You would have to do that through your local library where you have a card. And yeah, we're not a loaning library. We really don't keep more than one copy of most of our books. So we don't have one to loan.
Yeah.
Hope that answered it well enough.
Yeah, we don't participate in interlibrary loan with the public libraries.
Sorry, Lynn, I'm just going to jump in here. Don't forget, though, that we are offering a record lookup service right now.
Thank you, Beth. Tell them about that.
Yeah, so right now, if you go to the Family History Library's website, there is an option where you can go in and put in, I want you to go look at this book for me, and we will have some of our volunteers take a look at the book for you, if you give us enough details. So yeah, we don't do interlibrary loan, but we do have a record lookup service.
And we will not copy the whole book.
Within reason, we'll look at it in the index and see if the name's there and things like that, but we will look at our books for you.
Okay, Leslie asks, this is, I guess, in regard to the pension files that you were mentioning, as far as the effort for digitizing those and getting them up online. She asks, is there a similar effort for the United States colored troop pension files?
Aren't
those pension files all
colored troop pension files are not separated out from the regular pension files. So there is on Ancestry, there is an index for, they have made their own index for the colored troops. But there isn't, they aren't in a set that you could go say, hey, we're going to digitize these. It's just, they're going to go through the pensions and they're going to come across colored troop pensions and they just keep on, digitizing in order. And they are starting with the widow pensions because they have so much more genealogical information in them because they have to prove so much. That's what the Fold 3 and the NARA project together is. So no, I guess the answer is there isn't a project like there is with the Buffalo Soldiers. It's because they're
intermixed.
Right.
Yeah, they're not separated out into separate by the white troops and the United States colored troops. Yeah, so they're all together. I don't know if you guys remember what was the show that they used to have on TV years ago about the genealogy, and they would do famous people. Not the one by Professor Gates at the moment, but
the Who Do You Think You Are from that Ancestry did?
Yes, Who Do You Think You Are? I think that was it. And they had Vanessa Williams on there. And one of her ancestors served in the U.S. colored troops. And she went and looked at the pension file. She went to the National Archives. They pulled the pension file for her. And there was a picture of her ancestor. Her ancestor, when he had applied for his pension, he had sent a picture of himself. And that picture was in the pension file, and the woman who was helping her at the National Archives, if I remember this correctly, said she had worked there for 25 years, and this was the first time she had ever seen a picture of a soldier in the pension files. So you really don't know what you're going to get from those pension files. You don't know what your ancestors sent in. I think that's the end of the questions, unless we have any. Do we have any over on YouTube? Beth, are you watching that? I guess not. Okay.
Maybe she is, and that's where she's gone.
So, yes. Oh, okay. So we just got a question here on the chat. Does Family Search or Ancestry have military pictures like they do for high school students? So the yearbooks.
Oh, no, we do not have those on our website. But I know that Ancestry does the Navy, what do they call those? Navy,
Register books or?
no, when they go out on a cruise,
Oh.
Navy cruise.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
What's it called when they go on a cruise? It has a different name, but they are digitizing those. Has all the whole crew and pictures, kind of like a memory book, like a yearbook, only about their
Yeah, I can't remember what they
cruise
call
is not the right word. That doesn't give you the right impression of the military, but
I know what you're talking about, but I cannot
Yeah.
remember what they are called. Because I was in the Army, not in the Navy.
yeah. And the National Archives,
It wasn't a manifest. Miranda asks if it's a manifest, and what they weren't called manifest.
no, it's got more pictures in it than a manifest.
Yeah.
It's made for a memory type book. Yeah.
I think the only pictures that you would find is whatever on the tree.
Yeah.
So that.
But the National Archives and the Library of Congress have lots of pictures of this era.
Yes.
Some of the pictures I had were faded, but there's that one picture that I used that shows the buffalo soldiers, and they have a couple of them have big buffalo coats on, and they're standing in snow.
Yeah.
And it's a cool picture, and those pictures are out there on both of those sites.
I also know too that in Pennsylvania, the Carlisle War College has a really good collection of photographs, military photographs, and particularly from the Civil War. And I believe a lot of those are have been digitized and put on their website. I haven't looked at it though in years, but I'm going to assume it's still out there. So that's at the Carlisle War College. So I think if you just Google Carlisle War College, you can kind of poke around. So. Okay, so I guess that's the end of our questions. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us for today's webinar. Just a few reminders that this class was live streamed on the Family Search channel on YouTube, and the recording will be available as soon as this class ends, or as soon as I be quiet. However, the recording will only be available for a limited time. Remember, please, if you need help with a specific research problem, please sign up for a virtual consultation with one of the library's research specialists. We would be more than happy to help you with your research problems. And that link again has just been posted in the chat to sign up for a virtual consultation. Our next class which will be taught by U.S. and Canada team, will be, a panel question and answer session. That will be held next week on May the 27th, Thursday, at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, or Greenwich Mean Time -7. If again, that has just been posted too in the chat box where you can the link for that. If you have a question you would like answered during the panel discussion, we ask that you would please submit it using the link that has been posted in the chat. Again, we thank everybody for attending this class. Lynn, that was a wonderful class, a lot of good information in there. And I believe that was the first time that we've ever had this topic discussed in a class on our Family Search classes. So very, very good class. Everybody have a great day. We look forward to seeing you in our next session, our next question and answer session. So again, everybody stay safe, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.